Hey everyone, welcome to the UFO Hub. Welcome to the UFO Hub live stream. Boy, it's going to be one of those days. Today's guest is retired U.S. Navy Chief Master at Arms Sean Cahill. And he's also going to be one of the speakers at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference this year that's coming up in April. So that's one of the main reasons why I'm having him on. Later on, we'll take questions, and I'm only going to have Chief Cahill only on for 1 hour. So please make sure to submit your questions in chat, and also the live voice chat, UFO Hub voice chat that's happening on Telegram is going on as well. So you can directly talk to Sean and ask him the questions you would like to ask. So just let me switch over real quick to the website for Ozark. And so here's the list of all the speakers that will be speaking and lecturing during those 3 days. Of course, Chief Cahill is here, Ben Henson, and then we have several others that will be talking about many different subjects. Each one of them has a talk description, and you can kind of read up on it and see what exactly they will be talking about if you would like to know ahead of time. So there's still a few tickets left. They're going fast because a lot of the seating is assigned. Also, before this interview, I released a video where you will have a chance to win 2 tickets from UFO Hub. If you, on that video, like, share, and comment, and leave in the hashtag, leave in the comments a hashtag Ozark23. Not in this video, in that other one that's also on the UFO Hub channel, and I hope you check that one out. So I think I covered everything. When I talked to Sean ahead of time regarding the subjects, I seem to be pretty open about a wide variety of whatever might come up regarding the UFOs. So I figured let me bring him on, and we can just get started with the interview. Let me see here. We're just getting used to new things. Welcome, Sean. Thanks for being on. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Anand?
Well, thank you again for agreeing to do this. I'm excited to talk to you because a lot of times we talk about researchers and experiencers, but to have someone of your caliber to give us your perspective on what's going on, at least on the governmental side, at least on this channel, we don't get to hear that very often. So I'm glad you're here. So like with every guest, I would like you to please start out with a little bit with your background and how everything started out for you, and everything that led up to this moment.
Sure. My name's Sean Cahill. I served 20 years in the United States Navy as a Chief Master at Arms. And I'm known most notably for being present in 2004 on board the USS Princeton during the infamous Tic-Tac incident. Would you like me to expand on
yes, please.
Sure. So in 2004, when I was stationed on board the USS Princeton in November of 2004, I received a telephone call while I was standing watch on the bridge as the junior officer of the deck from Senior Chief Kevin Day. They had recalibrated and updated the Aegis radar system and the Spy-1B, and he was telling me that they had some anomalies on the radar that they were trying to hunt down. Over the course of the week, while I was on watch, I utilized my lookouts and my bridge personnel to try to find these things when Kevin would call. And we weren't finding anything on the bridge, so we just kept going about our regular operations during the exercise we were on. It was after a few days that Kevin called me up one evening at sometime around, I want to say around 2000 or 8 p.m. in the evening, and he was very serious that I speak to my lookouts and have them take a very serious look at the sky and scan the sky for these contacts, and to see if we could match up what they were seeing on radar with real objects in the sky. It was about around 10 o'clock that night that I had been out on the port side bridge wing with the one of my watches, and we were both scanning the horizon. And I was scanning from the port side over to the bow. And about 45 degrees off of the port bow at about 2,000 feet were roughly 5 to 7 lights. It's hard to tell exactly how many there were. They were in a tight configuration up in the sky, and they were turning towards the center point of this formation, and they were blinking out one at a time. almost as if they were falling down a funnel, a horizontal funnel, and then disappearing. There wasn't any kind of effect or noise or flash or anything like that. But there also wasn't any there weren't any clouds in the sky. There was nothing to obscure the view. It was crystal clear. I turned to the watch next to me and I said, with pretty salty language, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Yes, Chief, I did." And we both kind of just stared and looked around for a minute and kept scanning. And I went into the bridge with the intention of calling Kevin, and looked at the clock and realized that Kevin was off watch, and the person that was probably standing his console wasn't going to know what I was talking about or be very interested. So I just went about the rest of my evening. It wasn't until the next morning, when I woke up, I went out and got some coffee and spoke to the other chiefs out in the chief's mess, and I saw Kevin sitting there, and he had this big grin on his face. And I was a little annoyed. I was like, I said, "What do you got us chasing up there on the bridge? What do you got us looking for?" And one of the other chiefs sitting there told me to go check my email on the what we call the sipper net, or the secret side. We had one in our lounge in the back, so I went in the back and checked it and was reading through the email while everybody was waiting for me to get to the cool part, which was the video. But I wanted to read the chain of emails between our operations officers where they discussed birds, temperature inversions, ghosts in the machine, glitches in the system, all kinds of different things. And finally settled on the fact that these were solid objects and that we had sorted F-18s out there. The video was nothing short of astounding. Now it's famous. We've all seen it. But in 2004, it was one of the most incredible things I'd ever seen. We knew that what we were looking at had no wings, had no control surfaces. We knew that it was not the right temperature for the environment. It was very cold while the environment around it was very hot. And anything that was operating like that should have shown up as very hot. And also, it appeared to display flight characteristics that were completely out of the ordinary. So it was impressive, and we were all incredulous, and we all made some small talk about how this was bigger than Roswell, and couldn't wait till this panned out and we saw what this was going to turn out to be. And that evening, we had our regular intelligence and operations briefing, and I was asked to stand at the doorway in case anyone gave the door personnel a hard time by being turned away, because the door person was going to be checking a list with cross-referencing security clearances. And anybody who had their security clearance lapsed or that wasn't current, I was there to help turn them away if they gave the young petty officer a hard time. It turned out that no one was bothered by being turned away from yet another meeting. Everyone was happy to have a few more minutes to themselves. And it was only a handful of people. I'd never been asked to do that before or since. And we got in there and had the briefing and got to a point where the lieutenant started the briefing. And this was 2004, so the technology was pretty dismal as far as computers go. So the PowerPoint was very, very bare bones, but a little Mars alien type silver saucer with a green guy went across the screen with a spooky noise. And excuse me, a lot of people in the room had a good laugh. And then we spent a minute kind of explaining to the people who didn't know what was going on why we were laughing. And the captain said, "Well, we all had a lot of fun this week. It was pretty interesting. Now let's get back to work." And that was the last I had ever heard mention of it that wasn't scuttlebutt talked about amongst the crew or amongst other chiefs in the chief's mess. I never heard another official word about it until 2017 when the New York Times article came out.
So did was there maybe, I'm sorry if I missed it, was there some kind of, were you allowed to talk to each other, like between each other while this was happening? Like, wow, what's happened? What was that all about? And even afterwards, or was it immediately told, okay, don't talk until you told otherwise?
So as far as it goes for me, and I was the chief law enforcement officer on board, I reported directly to the executive officer for in charge of good order and discipline and anti-terrorism for the crew. I was never given a non-disclosure agreement. I was never given any kind of order or any kind of inference not to speak about the incident. Now that we're years later, and some people have said they were given non-disclosure agreements, other people were claimed to have been present when assumed Air Force personnel arrived on board and took the radar tapes and other things. But at no point was it ever inferred to me that anyone was, so none of the people that had NDAs ever talked about having an NDA. And I can't say that I really recall talking to anyone that wasn't a chief petty officer inside the chief's mess about the incident um, afterwards. So it kind of came and went. It was not an infamous event. It was a do you remember when? And if there were people around that hadn't been there, they thought we were full of it when we discussed the event.
So now that it's all out, and most of us have seen the footage, and many other people have kind of talked about it on different podcasts, do you have still any kind of connection to kind of get a feel of how the true feelings of whatever the government representation would be? Are they still truly wanting to find out what this is, or is this something that they still want to kind of keep it on the DL and not really talk about as much? But considering, I mean, that they just I forgot which bill it was, so HR something where they created the UAP office, and then of course they had some congressional hearings. It kind of surprised me because usually everything is a balloon or a swamp gas, and now they're kind of talking about it like, oh yeah, there's this, there's that. We don't know what it is. So I was wondering why that change, seemingly throughout the government chain.
Well, I can speak on that because since 2017, primarily what I have been working on in support of and as an advocate of was that transparency that led to congressional hearings and that led to the National Defense Authorization Act, which led to the UAPTF, et cetera. So let me go back to 2004 and say that the aftermath and the way that my chain of command responded to that incident at the time as a 30-year-old, I think I was 31. I had the way that I saw it at that time was that this must have been understood by the upper chain of command. I was giving captains and admirals and people like that a great deal of credit for what they may or may not have been briefed on or known. And to me, the way that they responded, which was kind of coldly uninterested, told me that this was something that they had an understanding of and they weren't worried about it, and that the captain wasn't concerned that there was something like this in his battle space. So that spoke to me about some kind of allied program and something I didn't need to worry about. But if we fast forward to 2017, and after the New York Times article, after meeting Luis Elizondo and a great deal of investigation and information in between, it's become very apparent to me that the majority of people in leadership and in high offices within our government, within our military, are still subject to the stigma around this topic, where it's still believed that in general it's not real, that it's a thing to be scoffed at, that it's a thing to have someone have their mental health questioned over. Now that's changed in the last 5 years to a very, very large extent, but it still exists. And there are factions within our military and within our government that seem to be very reticent to want any of this information to be transparent. They don't seem to want it to be investigated or the conclusions of those investigations to be shared with the public. And that's very concerning because this has been going on for 75 years. And whether it's ATIP or whether it's the UAPTF, there are numerous programs before that had conclusions, and that those conclusions were classified and the evidence was classified, and we still have not seen it. So there is a great deal of opposition. The question is why.
Sean, I wanted to ask you, so for the past 70 years, there have been a lot of stories, either through researchers or experiencers that have shared all that they've experienced and all that they basically have learned. Do you think the government would ever take a look at that, just to see? It's like, okay, well, when it comes to court, an eyewitness account is important, to recall of an event happening, and it can be admissible in court. But yet somehow, if that is also then shared regarding UFOs, then it's just a crazy person talking. What are your thoughts on that?
We are all under the yoke of the fact that we don't take each other seriously if we don't want to, and we're required to take each other seriously. You just gave a great example of the fact that someone's word can condemn another person to prison. But it really depends on whether that jury or that judge believes the authenticity and the confidence that person has. I think that we've reached a new era based on the evidence and the caliber of people that are coming forward. And that's not to say that other people had a lower caliber or a lower station per se, but our society does tend to listen to certain people more closely and take their advice and what they have to say a little bit more seriously than some others. And I think that now that we have military personnel coming out risking their careers, risking that being stigmatized by their colleagues and by their workplace or their government over these issues, that I think that a lot of people, whether in the public and in government, are gaining a great deal of confidence. And so we're seeing an exponential amount of evidence start to come out, a lot more people talking, a lot more people willing to talk about this. So it comes down to the stigma. And it's tough because, as you say, some of the anecdotal reports from folks, myself included, if we got into some of the stranger things, um, they're not in keeping with a regular day-to-day existence that many people claim to want to keep up. And it attacks a lot of people's beliefs in general. So if people can't find a way to fit in their beliefs with this, for some people, it's just too much to take, stigma or not.
So you just said something that piqued my interest. So, other than observing, have you had any kind of experiences that kind of mimic those from experiences that share about the feelings or what went on, during being, I guess, in close proximity of some of these things? Can you maybe share a little bit of that, if you have any of those experiences?
Yes. Uh, For the first few years that I was working on this topic, I was reticent to talk about all of the experiences I've had. I would talk offline with researchers or interviewers about them, but um, I was still subject to the stigma and a little scared. But this is something, when we talk about UAP or the phenomenon, this is something that I've been experiencing since childhood. I've had different craft, people would say, that I have seen different shapes, different interesting experiences, lost time, and what many people would classically call abduction experiences. Um, Due to the fact that I was a investigator, trained forensics investigator, a detective, a police officer in the military. To me, my own stories are something that I have to keep in a certain little bucket over here, and I keep them fenced off. And it's only been the last couple of years that I've allowed myself to compare some of my experiences with the research I've done and the things that I've read. And I dare say that I found myself more confused than ever, because there's still something in my I'm not able to present. Um, I'm not confident enough to tell details of my experiences to other people yet, because I'm not sure of those details yet. And I'm not sure that all of those things are valid memories versus perhaps a lucid dream. Um, and I've studied lucid dreaming, astral projection, hypnotism, neurolinguistic programming, all of those things in a search to try to understand if there's a way that we can differentiate um, between the authenticity of memory. Um, so I know that a lot of us, we have these experiences and we have memories, and they seem to correspond with other people's experiences, and we can do research that seems to tell us meaning and origin and things like that. But I haven't reached a point in my own experience with the phenomenon where meaning, origin, etc., are very clear to me. Um, I'm also a person that's really, I guess the word of the night is reticent, but reticent to dive into things like ascension culture and people that talk about, you know, these vast and deep messages that they claim that they're gaining from the phenomenon. I'm not having that same experience, so I try not to step on other people's anecdotes and experience, but I have a hard time accepting a great deal of ufology, for lack of a better word.
Do you think that if you did come out and just share some of these other stories that you had personally experienced, that you would be kind of, I guess, locked out of some information, by your peers, or will they be like, okay, well, let's maybe take a look at those?
It's a good question. I think that there are people that I might have a chance to work with in the next few years for advocacy that would be turned off by hearing some of the details of my experiences. The quote unquote opposition, which is a phrase I don't like to use, it gives the rabble that doesn't care for this subject more credit than they deserve. But they've used those stories just within the last couple of weeks. I've gone on a couple of podcasts and talked about a few experiences in a little more depth. And they immediately cut those up with other clips of things and tried to use them as something to attack my credibility. Um, I have to accept that. I have to accept that there is going to be probably an organized and constant attack on my credibility the more and more I'm willing to talk about the stranger aspects of this subject. But I'm not gonna I'm not going to lie to anybody, fib to anyone, make up any stories to make me sound better. I'm very confused at some of the things I remember, and I'd like them to make more sense. When it's valuable for all of us, I'll share them. But at the moment, just being one more story about, let's say, a triangle or a saucer, I don't feel that the details that are involved in those are important enough for me to expose myself to that right now, even though it might be entertaining for a lot of people. Um, until I have meaning or understanding, it's just yet another thing to place on top of the pile, if that makes sense.
It does. So you mentioned, factions within the government on their different point of views. So one of the bigger stories, as you probably already know, Roswell is big in the UFO field. And it's one of those things that started all the different speculations about, do we have ships? Do we not have ships? Were there bodies? Were there not? From your perspective, having been on that side, if there is anything that you can share, could you talk about something then that maybe we don't know about it, the government actually is looking into more, or is it still just whatever they release, that's it, and there's nothing more you can talk about?
Well, I think the what's really going on aspect of this is still being obscured from us. Um, I do believe a great majority of our leaders, our congressmen and senators, when they're the way that they're presenting, the way that they're interested, the questions they're asking, show me that some have been briefed a little bit more than others. But in general, we don't have a place to look to. You should be able to look to a Secretary of Defense, one of the chiefs of staff to give answers on this. They should have historical information, but if we're to even cherry pick a little bit of the zeitgeist, it seems that at some point the generalized leadership stopped being briefed on this topic and it became compartmentalized, stovepiped, as they say. So if we haven't found the stovepipes yet, if the UAPTF hasn't found the stovepipes yet, then there are going to be people that are going to have an understanding of this that does go back 70 years. And I think the elephant in the room in this case is the Air Force, because the Air Force has the most involvement in the topic. And so the answers should come from that place, and they're not. And the most cooperation from the subject matter experts should come from that place, and they're really not. So does an organized opposition stem from that? I use the word organized loosely because it doesn't seem to be very professional and involves a great deal of clowns and trolls. But the fact is it is being talked about in the halls of Congress and in the Senate, and it is. And when you have people like Kirsten Gillibrand, telling senior leadership to inform themselves, and then following up on those questions, and we let me digress for a moment and say that the Wilson documents have been entered into the record. Now Congress is aware of those exchanges and what went on and how those went down. We're all still waiting for the final report on what it all means, but it's apparent that whatever the long-term story is, there are folks that don't want to tell it. And I think that's because along the way, people probably did things that were seemingly unethical and probably blatantly unethical at some point. And I can understand the human predilection to not want to be holding the bag when it comes down to it. But this story does not get better with age, and it doesn't get better as it gets older. There's not a lot of folks on my side of the fence that spend 2 seconds wondering if Roswell was real or not, or whether it was UAP related. I think it certainly was. The surrounding details are, to even the most casual observer, once you dig into it, are pretty heavy. The formation of the Air Force within days of the incident, the all of the things that surround it do not in any way amount to the cover story of Project Mogul, or the merging of those ideas in people's minds. So Roswell would be a great place for the United States government to start. It could start there. But I think that leadership is frankly afraid. And I think that when it comes down to it, they're dealing with this just like the rest of us are.
Let me then bring up something more recent. And you mentioned something ever since these balloon flaps, you've been very busy. Can I ask you some questions regarding that? So,
Sure.
so for example, when this was happening, my phone was blowing up. Everybody looking to me to ask me. I'm like, I'm not the government. I have no connections. I wish I did. Then I could at least give whatever information I possibly could without, kind of breaching any kind of security. Is there anything that you can speak to regarding this recent balloon flap, and what is the government actually looking at for real? Do they think that this were UFOs, aka alien related, or UFOs as in, okay, literally unidentified objects that we don't know what they are? And I found it very strange that they shot down some things, but then can't, basically recover anything. Can you speak to that at all, please?
I can. I'm very confused and perturbed by the way that all came out. The idea that we're shooting things down that we can't identify is very frightening to me. Um, we've had lots of memes and jokes surrounding it, but had that been anything other than what we assume it was, which is foreign tech surveillance technology, then that could have been disastrous. Now, as far as UAP goes, I think we had a perfect storm of conflation, and I think that the naysayers, for lack of a better word, utilized that to their benefit. Um, what we saw was NORAD take certain filters off of the way that our skies are monitored, and this was done in conjunction with the NDAA and this subject. This was done due to this subject of UAP. Now, let me use the metaphor of the ocean for a moment. We have sonar out in the ocean, and we have detection equipment for national defense and for seismic reasons and for oceanic reasons and things like that. And they sample a certain portion of the spectrum to gain data back from the ocean. Now, let's say that once we changed that, it showed every shark and every whale and every submarine. But if we now differentiating between those, you have to arrive on scene to find out what they are, and you have to check the characteristics of the animal or the machine to differentiate between your submarine, your shark, and your orca. Something similar happened in the sky. The filters were removed, so anything below a certain size, moving in certain parameters that before would have disqualified it, are now being picked up by these systems. So an example of that was used was the system was not designed to track a missile that was standing still in the air. Even if the system saw it as a missile, it was to disregard it if it was standing still, because it was assumed that nothing can do that, and so it was not a threat. UAP have exhibited the ability to do things within those guidelines that were formerly prohibited from the system from tracking. So suddenly there's going to be a lot more things in the system being tracked. Now, that brings us back to the fact that we're shooting down unidentified things and then not collecting them. That's ridiculous. I don't necessarily believe that. And even when they talk about they're in the one that was adjacent to the Yukon, for example. The idea is that it was too remote, but that's ridiculous. Had that been a crewed aircraft of ours that we had lost in that area, search and rescue would have been on the scene nearly immediately to ensure the safety of lives and property. So we're not getting the whole story again. And we're not getting the whole story to understand why why some of these seem to be exotic shapes like tubes or hexagons, etc. So it's worrisome. It's the water is constantly being muddied every time we have a chance to make it more clear, unfortunately.
And so was it maybe just out of embarrassment that if they did recover whatever they recovered, it turned out just to be some monitoring device, and they went all out with how much did they cost? $400,000 for per missile, and went all out that way. Is it maybe to save face?
Um, Perhaps it's possible. I don't think saving face in this case would. I think there's not a lot of face to save when you are spending a lot of money. I'm not sure the exact cost. I misquoted it once, so I don't want to get caught doing that again. You're probably right, but again, using missiles to shoot down balloons seems like a disproportionate use of the taxpayers' money. Especially balloons that they're telling us, the sensor suite on there is no big deal. It really can't, we didn't really care what it was collecting. It wasn't over any important areas. But then all of a sudden, we're shooting them down all over the place. That's one of the possible reasons. It would be pure speculation, but it comes down to why don't they want us to know? Even if we're in a political environment where every situation's a no-win situation when put up against the opposition. We're so bifurcated in our beliefs right now that it's not as if they were going to lose hearts and minds. So why didn't they? They had a chance to have another, I guess, Jesse Marcel moment and show off the balloon. They didn't. That's ridiculous. All of these things should have been taken to a warehouse and photographed, and forensic investigation should have been done, and serial number tracking on the equipment. And there's 1,000 directions to go in this investigation, and I'm still baffled that they just fired a missile at stuff over the Yukon and let it fall down to the ground and flew away.
Regarding this scenario, and I guess many other scenarios that involves the government, having done these interviews for a long time and just talking to people in general, there's always been this blanketed they, that would include every single person from the lowest rank soldier to the highest, that they're all in on everything, and whatever is happening is, happening against, our benefit, and so that's something to be angry about. Being, having, being on that side, what is that from your perspective? Is like, can something like that occur? Or is it just literally just every single person doing their thing, the job that they are taught to do, in whatever rank they are, and they just not really questioning the orders because they're coming from up top? Can you speak a little bit to that, please?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think your average person in the military, I give them more credit for being intelligent folks than most people might. People in the military do see when things aren't right, or don't make sense, or aren't efficient, or waste money, or God forbid, loss of life, or unethical. But how much voice someone has and how willing they are to use that voice varies a great deal. Right now, this subject is barely reaching the general public in a serious fashion. The folks that are going to be at your conference that we're going to be speaking to all have a vested interest in this for one reason or another, and they've gone to great lengths to be involved in it. But to the average person, this is just a question that comes up once in a while at a cocktail party, or it's the subject of their late night entertainment. Let me shift over and say that this subject has not been politicized yet. Almost every other subject, every other thing you and I would want to talk about solving in our society has been politicized at this point, where if you have an opinion about making it better, it's going to make somebody else angry. Or if you have an opinion about making it going away, it's going to have a great deal of opposition to it. So let me say that we have things still in our culture that are absolutely ridiculous. The idea that an entire town in Michigan, Flint, Michigan, still has no potable drinking water, still has the same problems after all these years. Who has the authority to change that? Now, I think a lot of us would start pointing fingers and we would say those people have the authority. Why can't we hold each other accountable when it's simple things like drinking water? Now we're into a complicated subject like a 75-year-old obfuscated subject like unidentified aerial phenomena, UFO, possible aliens, crypto-terrestrials, breakaway civilizations, etc. It's daunting until there is a tipping point in the public eye on this subject, until it becomes something that enough people in the public say is important. We want answers, and we're not gonna stand for ignorance anymore. I think this will remain on the in the halls of Congress and around the corners and in the shadows and on the conference circuit. But we have to find a way to make people who have not experienced the phenomena, who have not witnessed the phenomena or had it touch their lives, become interested in this. And I still haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I know. Just actually, just yesterday, it was really funny. I saw one of my friends, and there were a group of them, and I got to this meeting late, and so he was like, "Oh, here comes the UFO conspiracy theorist," you know. And I just sat down. I was looking at him, and I mean, at this, it didn't like hurt my feelings or anything like that. But I sat down and looked at him. I said, "So the government has a office on UAPs to collect data. There's the TikTok footage that was released, and very credible military personnel has talked about this. We have congressional hearings about this. Tell me again, which part of this is conspiracy? You know, because for some reason, somehow because these guys I would consider as normal, everyday, average Americans, they have not seen that or not heard about that until I mentioned something. So maybe, I don't know, it's really, I know, sad that they were failed by media out there to be not informed about something as basic as that.
Well, I don't see you as a conspiracy theorist. I see you as a conspiracy realist, because the definition of a conspiracy, you only need a couple of folks to get together and decide to do no good to have a conspiracy.
Right.
And there's certainly more than a handful of folks involved in keeping these secrets and using this subject to confuse people, using it as an intelligence tool against our enemies, and perhaps, unfortunately, against our own folks in some way, shape, or form. Um, it, there is a conspiracy, but we have also been taught that conspiracies are practically entertainment now. All of them.
Right.
They're,
Right.
they're all they're all for late night History Channel and other shows, and you know. Um,
The
but the
word
fact
lost
is,
its importance.
yeah, and most of those conspiracies have some grain of truth at their center. That's how the story grew up around them. But if you cast enough dispersion on the truth, eventually people will look in the mirror and deny their own names.
Yeah. Well, let me make this announcement real quick. So, for those of you watching, in about 7 to 8 minutes, Sean is going to take some questions. For those who would like to ask a question, please submit it in the chat below. Please make sure to put 3 asterisks so that I know it's a question for me to read out loud instead of just the chatter that you guys usually do in the rooms. And then, of course, the UFO Hub Telegram voice chat is going on right now as well, where you can join it and raise your hand, and you'll be able to talk to Sean directly, only to ask a question, I hope, and not to have a whole paragraph of information. So anyway, just letting you know that in about, I guess, 7 minutes now, we will go to Q&A, so please have your questions ready. So Sean, do you ever see, maybe in the next 5 years, or anything drastic to happen within the government and the acceptance of these, of the UFO subject, or is it still going to be the same as it has been for the past 70 years? Maybe we'll have some spikes like we did with the balloons, and maybe some spikes that we did in 17 with some footage that's very, interesting being released. But then, other than that's as far as it will go.
I think those are all possibilities. But I'm very optimistic. There are a lot of things being done on the international front to bring this to the UN. Project Titan out of San Marino is one of those. Other efforts as well to collate data, to bring a very pragmatic and a very serious sight picture of this to leadership and to the public. I see a change coming up. I see a moment where I think that pragmatism is going to leak into leadership, and an idea of more so of amnesty, okay, of moving forward, of bringing all of the information out and saying, listen, whatever happened in the past, post World War II and during the Cold War, we're going to have to look at it through the lens of those challenges and the challenges that came out of all of the people who, let's face it, a whole world suffering post-traumatic stress disorder after World War II. And then to walk right into this subject and have to deal with it immediately, I don't blame them. So call me an apologist if you want to, but we need to move forward. And if it's the shame of the past or past mistakes or the sins of the father in some way that have kept us from telling the truth, then I think it's time for us to bring everybody in and just cut them some slack, tell the truth, fix it, and move on. So there are efforts to do that. There are efforts to move this forward onto the international stage, get the rest of the world around this problem, so it's not just an American-centric problem. So I'm very optimistic. Now, if all of us are happy to be quiet and go home and watch this on late night TV and munch popcorn, then it will be exactly what it has been for the last 75 years. I think that there are enough powers that be, so to speak, that would love to wipe this right back under the carpet and stomp it out. It's imperative that folks like us that are willing to put the effort into this and to come together to meet, that we keep working and we keep refining our elevator speeches and taking the sensationalism out of our subject and make it more palatable for the general public and for leadership. And I think we'll get where we want to go.
I wanted to ask you a question that something that stood out when I first was reading it, and I'm sorry, I can't recall if it was the initial report, UFO report that came out, or after the UAP office was formed. But in the whole list about all these things, the purpose of what they will do, and again, I don't remember exactly which one it was. It said something very interesting, that it would also collect data, and I'm really hoping I'm not mistaken on this part, but it will collect data on the physical effect on people by UAPs. And I thought that was interesting because I never really, because I thought they were just going to keep it on a data level, and not, go as far as that. Can you please speak a little bit about that, or whether or not someone or yourself, has been affected physically, your senses, or whichever way by a close proximity of a UFO?
I don't know if I ever have or not. I've never submitted to a body scan or MRI. Um, never been asked to. But I do know that Dr. Gary Nolan has worked in the area of after effects. Now, I'm not fully aware of the programs he's worked on, and he's the expert people should turn to his talks and his podcasts. But there has been research done on this in the past, and so that means that there is current and past data that can be immediately sanitized, declassified, given to academia, spread across the board to as many great minds as we can. And I that is something that must be studied, because we can't say that these things are present and that people are not in proximity to them. There are American military personnel that are on disability for after effects from being in proximity to UAP when they were powered up. And so just as they say, if you understand the metaphor of crows, where there is one, there is probably many others. These are not singular cases. So having the UAPTF, having the Aero office collate this data, present it to the public, that's another thing that would be very valuable, is to have a government office give the general public and leadership a sight picture of what has happened in the past, where we are now, what are the things that actually do occur around this subject, because the fact is, like it or not, abduction scenarios, abduction cases seem to be a part of this, and it makes people uncomfortable. There are whole cadres who will tell you exactly what it means, what's going on, and tell you how it's happening and everything else. But we're not at a point where we have any kind of authoritative or homogenized view of that. So just speculating wildly for a moment, if we were dealing with something like a breakaway civilization within our own borders, and that seems kind of crazy, but let's say the Eisenhower's warning of the military industrial complex was far more sinister than a lot of people believe. And if someone broke away, and I know a lot of people have very deep theories about that and about subterranean bases and things like that. I don't have any direct evidence for that, but if those things happened, those are vastly important for the rest of us to understand and to know about. And they're also really mind-blowing. So it's going to take all hands on deck, an all hands on deck approach to maintain our emotional stability through this, to keep people listening, and to stick to the data. So I look forward to the next few years, but I think they may be chaotic at some point.
Well, great. Thank you for that. Well, so it's that time, and if you're ready, I'll be giving you some questions then from the people that have submitted some of those. So anyway, for those of you watching or just tuning in, even though you might not know what's going on, you can still ask a question starting now. We'll still be on for another 15 minutes, so now is the time. So this is a question from Light, Love, and Awake. The question is, many people have surreal dreams involving ETs. Given that the powers that be are now investigating UFOs, any chance that people will start to be taken more seriously about their ET experiences?
I think it's possible. I think that we need to bring in a lot of the experts in neuroscience that might be able to bridge that gap between lucid dreaming and UAP, and we're going to need to bring in folks from more esoteric studies, meditation, folks perhaps from the Monroe Institute, who can explain in a non-classical sense how the neuroscience and the esoteric ideas meld in together, because that's what folks like Monroe and others have done, is to try to dig into their own personal experiences using science. I believe they've made breakthroughs in that. And I believe that it speaks to the fact that that we are more than this physical body, as the Monroe Institute is apt to say, but that there are levels of reality, perhaps above and perhaps below us, that we have a chance to interact with. I personally believe that UAP utilize those other areas of reality, at least for faster travel, if not utilizing it as an origin or a way station or even another place to exist. So if those are all aspects of this phenomenon, I don't think the government will have a choice in the future but to take these aspects more seriously. I know that researchers within the government are already researching these aspects of consciousness in regards to UAP.
Great, thank you. The next question is actually more of a statement, and I guess if you could speak to that, please do. It's just a statement from Andrew saying, Tic-Tac is man-made EM drive.
I don't have any evidence of that. If that's true, that company should be running the world right now if they've had that technology since 2004, or that group of folks. And I think we also would have seen it proliferate more than just that incident. I would argue with that. I don't have enough evidence to say that.
Okay. The next question is from Constellation Fleet, asking, do you think that we will ever get a report from AARO?
Yes, I do. I think we will get the reports that were mandated, or you'll see people fired, or you'll see, we know how government works. Government doesn't always do what it's supposed to, but again, there we are. We're the people. Accountability is in our hands to communicate with our representatives. And I would say to anybody that, and I'm not trying to cast a shameful eye back on anybody, especially the question asker, but those of us who do ask those questions have to be the people that are also writing our congressman. We have to be able to turn around and say, yes, I have done my due diligence as well. So we stand to gain a lot. I think we need to stay the course.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Verona Farm, asking, what does Sean think about the idea proposed by some that UFO-related data be made available to scientists or some other select group for study, but not the general public? National security?
I think that national security would be the only reasons for that, unless the picture painted was something that might incite a public riot or a destabilization of society. That's another one of those great questions that we bring up about the what are we, who are we, and where did we come from, is also how would we handle it if the following were true. I'm not fully, I'm not ready to gamble at all yet. If somebody out there knows what reality is, and they think that it's going to destabilize the rest of us, I'm not sure that making it public before the educated academic cadre has a chance to deal with it is the right idea. I'm not sure, but I'm also one of those people that thinks that healthy skepticism of our mainstream scientific establishment is a good thing to have. We have to keep folks that are highly focused. There have to be generalists to bring the specialists back to why we do this, and we do these things not just for grant money or to make us look good in our careers, but to advance humanity as a whole. So, yeah.
Thank you. The trying to figure this out. This person, I think, has two questions, but it's sorry, I'm getting myself confused here. I'm going to ask it if it makes sense to you. I've been trying to reread it. Please speak on that. If not, I understand if you don't answer it. So the first part says, with the greatest respect, Sean, you say you don't know how to engage the public at large. So they in turn engage the government and request answers. Surely incontrovertible evidence is the solution. And this is the second part, and where the actual question comes through. So I think it's in relation to this, asking, how do we go about witnessing that?
Hmm. Well, I think what they're saying is that folks like me need to step up a little bit higher on the soapbox and challenge our government, people that have a voice. And I think a lot of us are doing that. But I think a lot of folks that watch podcasts and other things like that, they may have a skewed idea about who all of us are in our private lives. I'm just a regular guy, with a family, has to pay his bills, not a celebrity. I don't do this job for money. I don't get pay. I rarely get paid for any of my efforts in this field. Um, so I'm doing as much as I can right now. We can all do a little bit, but I agree that engagement with our government is absolutely imperative. But let's be real, it's imperative in all the other areas that are deficient in our lives, um, that we're really not pulling our weight there, and where we are pulling our weight, the government isn't always responding well. So we are at a crossroads. It will require further courageous effort on the part of all of us.
Great, thank you, Sean. Well, I want to take the remaining time to actually ask you, in the description below, I figured those that want to maybe interact with you or contact you somehow, I included your Twitter. I hope you don't mind. And then, of course, there's your website. If you can maybe speak a little bit about that, if you like, or some other subject in conclusion.
My website's something I haven't maintained recently, so I'll have to get back on there. But I really use
Okay.
it just as a portal to contact me. Folks can contact me via Twitter. I do open my DMs up every couple of months, but if you at me, or I can usually I'll usually see that when I get on there, but I haven't been as active on there recently. Um, if people want to contact me via my email, mintyhyperspace@gmail.com, is my primary email. It does take me a little bit while to open up correspondence because I do get a lot of folks who share their stories with me and have questions, and I try to give people the time that they put into the correspondence with me. I try to give that back to them, so that often means a very slow turnaround. Um, but this, if I have had a moment to give kind of a closing statement, it would be
Sure.
that, like a lot of us, I've been interested in this subject since I was a child. I've come and gone with how serious it was to me and how important it was to my life. Um, for me, it's a very important thing. It's something that I think that we do need to change in the world, and that will have follow-on implications and positive change for the majority of humanity. But I do recognize that for a great deal of the people that we live, love, and deal with, they're not interested. It's not important to them. It's frightening to them. It doesn't make a great deal of sense to them. So they look to us to be positive leaders and examples when it comes time to understand this and when they do encounter those changes in their life. So I just think that if all of us can take a nice deep breath, re-examine what we want out of this, look at each other and find the commonality of purpose and mission that we have in this, I think we'll succeed. I think that if we seek to be less factionalized and less separated by differences of opinion, and focus on those shared missions of truth and finding out what's really going on together, then I think we will win.
Well, Sean, thank you for that. And thank you again for coming on tonight. I appreciate your time. I know, especially for what you're doing, and I'm pretty sure for everybody, time is valuable. So I certainly appreciate it. And I'm also looking forward then to meeting you in person at the Ozark conference. And so for those that are still watching, and for those that will be watching this video, all the links for Sean are in the description below, to be able to see what's going to be happening at the Ozark UFO conference coming up in April. The link for that is also in the description. So please check it out and come see us both. I will be there. Sean will be there. Sean will be one of the keynote speakers. And just the way the conference is basically set up, there's always opportunity to speak and basically meet with the speakers after the talk, and also throughout the conference. They're just walking around wherever they happen to be, and you can stop them and say hello. So I hope you certainly take the opportunity to come out and see us both. So Sean, thank you again. I really appreciate it, and see you soon.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you, Adnan.
All right. Well, everyone else, thanks for watching. Please tune in next time. Usually it's going to be on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. I'm not sure who will be the next guest, but I will make an announcement as soon as I find out. So thanks again. Y'all take care, and we'll see you some other day.